Now, President Obama says there are no quick fixes or silver bullets to the high price of gas, but this is exactly what the administration wants to happen with gas prices. Don't believe me? Here is Energy Secretary Stephen Chu in 2008. Quote, "Somehow we have to figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to the levels of Europe." By the way, the levels in Europe are around $10 a gallon. So according to our Energy Secretary, I guess we're headed in the right direction. With us now to talk about the Obama administration's misleading facts about oil production is Jack Gerard. He is the president and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute, and also for the latest on oil and Iran and how much leverage they actually have with their oil. We have Kevin Freeman. He is the author of Secret Weapon, who has been on the program again. Good to see you, Kevin.
Good to be here.
Okay, Jack, I want to start with you. I want to start with a couple of these charts that I have. The first chart is America's Choice 2020, and I see the choices are increase oil and natural gas development, or raise the oil and natural gas taxes. Can you show this chart and explain this to us, Jack?
Yeah, really what this is, Glenn, is the president, what he's put forward is not only an energy policy that limits our production here in the United States of oil and natural gas, but he's proposed an $85 billion tax increase on the industry. And so what you see in that chart is the effect of what would happen if we were given the opportunity to produce our own oil and natural gas, or if we implemented the president's tax increase. If we're allowed to produce our own oil and natural gas, we can create 1 million+ jobs in the next 7 years.
Okay.
If not, we're going to lose jobs because we're going to increase the cost of energy production.
All right, let me go to the next.
That playing out over 2020.
Let me go to the next chart. It's 2030. That if we continue down this path, show now what we've lost.
Yeah, very significant. If we go the route of producing our own oil and gas, we can create 1.4 million jobs. We'll generate $800 billion to the Treasury in addition to what we already contribute. And we could generate and produce as much as 10 million barrels a day more, which is almost half of what we currently consume, which could make us energy self-sufficient when we combined our production with Canada's.
Okay. This one really drives me nuts because I know just enough about drilling for oil to be dangerous. I have a good friend who is in the oil business, in fact, several good friends who are in the oil business. And when we were doing this with the Gulf and he shut everything down, they were screaming at me, "Glenn, explain to people about what happens to the oil rigs. They think these giant oil rigs are just sitting there and going to wait around. They won't." Let me show you chart number 3, Quest Offshore. Explain this.
Well, Glenn, what you see there is that immediately following the moratorium, when the president said, we're not going to issue any more permits, we're just going to hold everything steady, 11 oil rigs, major rigs, left the Gulf of Mexico and went to other parts of the world, Brazil, Angola, etc.
Okay, now these,
what's significant,
they don't come back,
go ahead.
right?
Well, they might in the future, but not until they have an opportunity with permits to drill in the Gulf. Some of these rigs cost $500,000 a day to operate. We estimate we have lost, through that very study, that Quest study, we lost 91,000 jobs in the Gulf when that presidential decision was made.
Oil production is down how much in the Gulf?
Well, if you look at where it was expected to be at this point, we're 30% down from where we should have been for 2012.
Holy cow. This is our...
Now, this is the same president, Glenn, as you know, who talks about record oil production. It has nothing to do with his policy. In fact, what we have done as an industry is in spite of the president, not because of the president.
Okay, so explain that, because in his weekly address, he said, for the first time in 13 years, less than half the petroleum we consume was imported. True?
Well, there's the answer to that is that's factually correct. But let me tell you why it's misleading. The reason our imports are down is because demand in the United States has dropped significantly because of the recession. So either the president is impliedly taking credit for the downturn in the economy, or he's taking credit for the increase in domestic production, which is what we in industry have done on state and private land. On federal land, where the president has control, we're down 30% in the Gulf. Leasing in the Rocky Mountains onshore is down 70%, and the list goes on.
Let me go to this one. He says there are more oil permits now than ever. True or false?
Well, the challenge with that one, Glenn, is they get to define what an oil permit is. So we always go back to production and say, all right, if you're issuing so many permits, then where is the production to match the permits? The bottom line is they're not issuing more permits than they have. In fact, we're about 30% down from where we were pre-Gulf issuances versus today. But the bottom line is we're hurting the country because we're producing less here. And with every barrel of production, we're employing individuals, we're paying high wages, we're generating revenue to the government, and it's making us more energy secure. So there's adverse multiplier effects to these policies that push these jobs and production offshore.
Let's say we get a new president, which I'm not sure we will, but let's say we get a new president next year. How fast can they turn this around? I'm very concerned, and we're going to talk to Kevin here in a second. I'm very concerned about what's happening in the Middle East. I'm very concerned with the collapse of a global economy, quite honestly. And if we don't have access to our own resources, we lose. We lose. And somebody will take them from us. How fast can we turn this around?
Well, there's a couple key factors, Glenn. The first one is we've got two models today that we can see real time in the United States. State of Pennsylvania, state of North Dakota. Now, these are state and private lands, so President Obama doesn't have the ability to stop that production. In Pennsylvania, we've generated over 83,000 new jobs in the last 18 months. In North Dakota...
Say that again.
83,000 new oil and gas jobs in just the state of Pennsylvania in the last 18 months.
Holy cow.
In the state of North Dakota, just recently they've become the #3 oil producer in the United States. Unemployment in North Dakota is 3.2%. The average oil and gas job pays $90,000 in North Dakota.
The average?
The average.
Wow.
The average job for the rest of their state, individuals employed in their state, is $45,000. So we have high school graduates making more today in the oil and gas business than their moms and dads have ever made. So we can take those models and we can move that across the entire country if given the opportunity to do it.
North Dakota, though, that is actually, there's a cap on that because people are afraid to invest there because they don't think the Keystone is going to be built. They don't think there's going to be anything that happens with that oil, that they're going to be shut down or reduced significantly. True or false?
Well, our ability to continue to transport that oil is been impacted adversely by the president's decision to not allow the Keystone XL pipeline to be built. But they are moving that oil in other means, through other pipeline, through rail car. It's unfortunate because much of the pipeline's capacity would have been to actually take U.S. production down to the Gulf of Mexico to be refined.
Okay. Let me bring Kevin in. Kevin, I mean, you see what's happening around the world. You and I both are of like mind in many ways on what we think is coming. We're being absolutely set up by people all over the world, including our own people.
Right.
And our president is tying our hands. I read a study today that said if Ahmadinejad decides to block the strait, oil is $440 per barrel. Do you think that's reasonable?
Oh, if they block the strait, absolutely. But they can achieve that level of price without blocking the strait.
How?
Well, two ways. One is OPEC controls 80% of the world's oil reserves, but they only produce about 36% of the world's oil supply. They just restrict supply. And that's what Boone Pickens told me. That's their #1 mechanism. We'll just restrict supply. I mean, Saudi Arabia promised us we won't let oil go over $100 a barrel.
They're doing it.
It's already gone.
Yeah. Well, we don't carry, I mean, China doesn't even return our phone calls anymore.
Yeah. Well, China is the preferred customer for Saudi oil.
Correct. And I believe Brazil as well now.
That's right.
Yeah. So all they have to do is restrict it. Remember, America, the collapse happened, and you know this as well. What was it, $140?
$147.50 in the 1st of July, 2008.
What does $440 a barrel?
It's border. We're over as an economy. We're over as a nation.
How much is gas, do you think, at that? No idea.
Jack,
do you have any idea? Do you think, first of all, do you think $440 a barrel is reasonable if Iran decides to break or stop the flow of oil in the Straits?
I'd have to take a look at the study you're looking at, Glenn, to really better understand it. But the price of gasoline tracks very closely to the cost of crude oil. So you could almost take those numbers you're talking about, and if they're realized, just extrapolate them up, and it's a pretty direct relationship.
$10 to $12.
Or just cripple us.
And they can still achieve that just using the paper markets, which is what I talked about in the book. Sovereign wealth funds get most of their money from oil. If the price of oil goes up, they have more money. They take that money and they put it into our commodity markets, and they spike the price even higher. So maybe it's $30, $40 a barrel at the current price is speculation from the paper markets.
So the president, I think it was the president this weekend, blamed Wall Street for the price of gas.
Well, the Wall Street allows the mechanism by which prices can go higher. The question is, where's the money coming from? And what we found is a lot of that money is coming from the Middle East and the sovereign wealth funds. So what they're doing is they're taking the extra money they're making and throwing it back in to keep the price artificially high.
Jack, do you believe Wall Street? What is the cost of gasoline really all about now?
Well, clearly, Glenn, again, it tracks the crude oil price. So the variables that set the price of crude oil around the world, such as what we're talking about, the concern of the Straits of Hormuz, the demand in China. But what's important for us to focus on, which is what we keep trying to stress here in the United States, the only variable we control is supply. And while we don't control world supply, we have vast amounts of oil and gas right here in the United States. And if we had the political will to produce that oil and to put it on that market, it will have downward pressure on price. Now, the key to that, as I talked about earlier, if we were allowed to produce all that we have here in the United States, coupled with what we import from Canada, hopefully build the Keystone XL pipeline, and add to that the renewables we're producing, we could become self-sufficient in North America in 12 years. Now, that's a big deal, but we've got to be able to produce what we have so that the Straits of Hormuz conversation, the anxieties around the globe do not play as much into that equation, right, because we're taking our future into our own hands.
Jack, I want to thank you very much for being on the program. Kevin, I want to spend
Glenn.
You bet. I want to spend a couple more minutes with you because I want to zero in on Occupy Wall Street, and I want to talk a little bit about the radicals that are here in America. And I want to see if we can get this quote. Can we get the quote from Unrestricted Warfare, please, by the PLA? Do you have it? Page 120, 122, 123. Listen to this. Now, this is on how to beat America. This is the People's Army in China. Go ahead.
Okay. It says, however, by using the combination method, a completely different scenario and game can occur. If the attacking side secretly musters large amounts of capital without the enemy nation being aware of this at all, and launches a sneak attack against its financial markets, then after causing a financial crisis, buries a computer virus and a hacker detachment in the opponent's computer system in advance, while at the same time carrying out a network attack against the enemy so that the civilian electricity network, traffic dispatching network, financial transaction network, telephone communication network, and mass media network are completely paralyzed. This will cause the enemy nation to fall into social panic, street riots, and political crisis.
What part of that isn't being done?
Every part of it's being done.
Every part of it.
The last part, the street riots, is what we've seen called for by George Soros and what we've seen called for and what you just showed from the
So who's doing this, or is it everybody?
It's everybody. I think it's a rogue elements in China, in Russia. It's clearly Iran. It is clearly sovereign wealth funds that want to establish Islam, the caliphate, reestablish the caliphate. It's all of them.
You know, could you turn the board around to that little silly network that I put together this morning? I was on the radio today and I was talking about this. Eileen, if you will, write one thing. I put Islamist. Put over in the other corner. Just put Iran. It really is. Open up the wing that has the. Is it that side that has the Islamists and extremists? Will open. It's the other side. I don't know if you can open it now. But I was looking at this today. Anonymous is now going after Israel.
Right.
They're going after the government, et cetera, et cetera. But we know the guy who was part of WikiLeaks was working directly for the Russians now. It's gone over to work for Vladimir Putin's Russia TV. Leave them both open there. Yeah, okay. You have Russia in bed with Iran and Syria, so you have a connection there. You have the education that college professors going over to Iran to talk about Occupy Wall Street, so now you've got that in the mix. You have the White House endorsing Occupy Wall Street, doing nothing about Anonymous, and you also have them in bed with educators and SCIU and AFL-CIO, which we now say, we've just showed this to you today, where they're saying, let's take down the market. You have Iran saying they're going to take down the market. You have the media silent at best, and you have Islamists doing the same thing. It's no coincidence.
No.
This is coordinated all around the world by these people.
I don't know how coordinated, but I did find it interesting that when the Iranians said, we will retaliate for the economic war, we will use secret weapons, and then they go on and describe those things that we've just talked about. So it's almost as if they read my book, and I know they've actually gone into my website because you can see who's monitoring it, who signs up for my Facebook updates and so forth. The Iranians are looking at it. I wish I could get the White House to look at it, but the Iranians are looking at it.
Their secret weapon is?
Their secret weapon is economic. It's everything that I talked about. It's credit default swaps, it's crashing our stock market, it's pumping the price of oil, and it might be an EMP. Maybe they're building a bomb for an EMP.
Hey, let's not say that. Let's shh, keep the EMP thing to yourself. That just is so frightening.
You know, that's what the Pentagon says. In fact, they won't even war game it because they know it's over.
If you hit with an EMP, the only thing that will save us, quite honestly, is if the whole world is hit by an EMP. If the whole world is leveled at the same playing field that that we're not the only ones without power, but if we're the only ones without power, Russia comes and takes our oil fields up north. China comes and takes everything out west and in the Gulf, and maybe more from South America. They come flooding up over the border. I mean, we are overwhelmed that fast.
Becomes a great American buffet for everyone to eat.
Frightening times.
They are, but we can change things.
How?
Well, we talked about oil prices. I did a study, and I wrote for the Pentagon the economic portion of the directed study on Iran. The way to beat Iran is not doing what we're doing. We're fighting them our paper for their oil. We're trying to cut off their access to the dollar. That's the exact opposite of what we should be doing. What we should be doing is driving oil prices down. We should be producing as much oil as we can here. We should be doing everything. The Saudis don't want the Iranians to have nuclear weapons.
Right.
We should be working with the Saudis and keeping oil prices down. Below $80 a barrel, Ahmadinejad's gone.
And Russia wins as well.
Well, Russia wins from the high oil prices,
right.
No doubt. Yeah,
right. All of our enemies are winning from the high oil prices, and we are losing from them.
We should team with China, though. The Chinese don't want ultimately higher oil prices.
Right. Okay, Kevin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn.
Back in just a minute.